This is it. Ryan Bailie, Olympic or ex-Olympic triathlete.
Yeah, Olympian, Commonwealth Games medalist.
Yeah.
Now has been, I guess.
Hectic, washed up.
Washed up.
Nice.
Washed up and old.
What's your I was kind of stalking your profile yesterday. You were competing as late as like 2019.
Yeah, so 2019, I was kind of hoping to make one more Olympics. Obviously went to Rio in 2016.
Yep.
Com Games 2014. So
Yep.
I was on that trajectory. Obviously, once you hit Com Games, Olympics, whole nother beast. It's like kind of like stepping stones.
Yep.
And then it was kind of at my peak, I guess, coping for 2020.
Yep.
Post 2016, a few injuries crept in. Body became a bit older, even though I was in my peak. Changed coaches. It was a bit of a rough 4-year trajectory. And then obviously 2020 come into the Olympic year. That's when all the qualification happens. Did a race over in Mooloolaba, over in Sunshine Coast, which is the first where generally our series starts. Because obviously we're worldwide, so generally start in the southern hemisphere, make your way north during their summer.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously triathlon being a summer sport, swim, bike, run. It started the season here, and then all of a sudden on the news you heard something about COVID.
Yep.
Interesting enough, 2019, I finished my season in Beijing in September. So
you were there.
So I was obviously there when it was there, and you're like, COVID won't hit our shores sort of thing. Like you're always in those countries and they're always wearing masks. And then, went across to Sunshine Coast to race to start our season. And that's where they started putting the clamps down. Evening before the race, there was talks it would be cancelled because it was mass participation. But then they're like, the pros will go ahead because it's our Olympic year, points, qualification.
Yeah, that's more important than health. So
yeah, so they were like the age group as well. We might put them on the back burner, and we'll just still race with the pros. But then, long story short, straight after the race went ahead. They said, we're going to go into a 2-month holding where there won't be any competition.
Hectic.
And then that was the last time pretty much I've jumped on a plane after being a frequent traveller.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you're kind of paused by default, not through like a choice of...
Yeah, I guess like for me, because I had such a rocky, our qualifying period's over 2 years. So it's a 4-year cycle to the next Olympics, but the last 2 years into that cycle is where the qualification sort of starts.
Yep.
And because I'd been so injured, I had to race. So obviously no qualification races were then in the foreseen future. Everything was a bit shady and rocky. Sponsorship started dropping because longer the COVID went on. You're not racing. You're getting retainers. They're slowly just diminishing.
Yep.
Because a lot of my structure with sponsorships was obviously based on performing.
Yep.
And then, sort of like lockdown hit here. Me and my wife were up in Perth, moved down to Busselton before they started shutting the borders.
Yep.
And then before you know it, I was still training. Like obviously down here was awesome training because the roads were quiet. But then it got to a point like, is this ever going to open? Then they postponed the Olympics, and then, life sort of kept going at a fast pace, even though it was kind of slow. And it was like, I needed to race to obviously qualify, and I was like, that window's slowly diminishing. Olympics then got postponed a year, and it was like, it just feels right to step away quietly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's obviously right before we press record. The reason I've always been fascinated in your story because I was doing cross training for skating and cycling, and I was always like B division, you're always A division. But it wasn't like there was such a massive gap between our fitness levels, skill levels, whatever. But like you were just on another fucking plane. Like it was crazy. I think the thing that always blew my mind is like I went away to Europe, did a year, like semi-professional, did the thing, was on team, sponsored, blah, blah, blah. But you just kept going. You kept on going that's like another 8 years, 9 years. So it's like, the point that you must have got to, I mean, you've touched on so many big things like injury, being an aging athlete, sponsorships at a real high level, like all of those things, you would get to a point where you're like, I'm reading the writing on the wall right now. And it's like, this might just be a nice time to fade into the shadows type thing. It must have been a really interesting transition from being literally a lifelong athlete to just being a normal person.
Yeah, I think obviously grew up in Bunbury, went to Adam Road, Newton Moore, and then sort of left here, travelled quite extensively for that period. Like I was only ever here for about 2 weeks at a time. But Bunbury always, I don't know, something about it. You're always at school, you're like, I'm going to leave, go up to Perth, do university, get out of here.
Yeah, move to Melbourne.
It's not until you like you travel, you realise how good Bunbury is. And then obviously I'd met Hilary actually at my sister's wedding. She was a photographer. Flew back in 2016. I still tell the story that all my sister got back was an album of me. Hilary's subtle hint that she was kind of into me, obviously being the wedding photographer.
Beautiful.
So yeah, like for me, I don't know, like Bunbury always grounded you in a sense. You might have reached I went like 5 years in a row when I was top 5 ranked in the world, but could still come back into Bunbury life and just fit in.
Yeah.
So for me, like stepping away, retiring was quite easy because I never felt like I was worshipped or anything like that or put on a pedestal. Sure, you'd go to a race, someone would ask you for an autograph or things like this, but that was kind of like you're in work mode.
Yeah.
Where when you'd come back, you're still grounded, you're still that normal person. It's not like you have, I don't know, like you see some people and you're like, why would you carry on like that? Like you're just another person, and that's how I always was. So I think a lot of that's to do with obviously how you're brought up, but then obviously the grounding that Bunbury gave along the way.
You're in the most humbling of sports though. You're like, triathlon is like 3 really hard sports put together into one.
Yeah, well, some people say the master of none. You were just no good at swimming, no good at biking, and no good at running really. So you put them all together and try and be good at one sport. Yeah. But yeah, like triathlon is not an easy sport. I mean, it wasn't easy to get to where I was, especially coming from Bunbury. Was a little bit isolated in that sense. Yeah. Obviously, a lot of trips to Perth, but then from when I got to that state level, it's like, well, now you need to move interstate to be, and that's what happened. Like I finished school, did a gap year here, and then I was like, oh, I'll go to university. Still never been. Yeah. I was hoping to study sports science, but just had to move to New South Wales. Packed everything up, had no idea what I was getting myself into. Next thing, you're there for like 3 months at a time, sort of thing. We stayed there, trained in Falls Creek, AIS, you name it, every institute of sport sort of thing. Yep. And then we used to set up camp in Europe for 6 months of the year. Yeah,
and the big thing about Europe is like once you're there, you kind of want to squeeze it because you're like, I'm not going home for the weekend. I'm probably not going home for like the foreseeable future. So it's just like, I know my experience was like, all right, I have to go extremely hard every training session, figure this out, every competition. Although I don't know about triathlons. Like we went from being able to compete once a month in Bunbury or Perth to like competing sometimes 3 times a week. We do like a Wednesday in a city, and then you could like go to different small towns and there'd be like race meets and part of series and all that you could get. Did you have that in Europe as well with triathlons?
Yeah, I guess like triathlon, like think of it like the Premier League soccer, right? You got the top, so that's your World Series where all the big hitters are at. There's only 65 athletes. Each nation can only give like, I think it's 5 starts now. And then you've got like a tier underneath, which say has 80 starters. And then you've got like your bottom feeders or your third tier, where it's like Continental Cup. There'll say be races in Australia. Yep. Bigger fields, but your ranking to require to enter those isn't as high. So that's where you start. Okay. Prize money's not as good. So typically you're kind of like looking at the start list. Am I going to make money this weekend to then be able to live off for next week? Because obviously the way like sport works in Australia is you've got tiering systems. So you at some point you're going to get government funded by the AAS, but it's not until you're right at the top
some point,
echelon.
it's like 10 years away and going pro.
So like you're going to these smaller races and you're literally looking, okay, I can make 500 US, my travels cost X, I might make 100 US, I've got food for next week. Yeah.
If I win.
Yeah, if you win. Yeah. And there's all uncontrollables you can't control, like what happens if I get a flat tire on the bike, like what happens if someone crashes in front of me, what happens if I'm just having an off day, because you go to work some days and you have an off day. Like our office was racing, but you had to be at your peak physical fitness. So it was always like the unknowns, but then you always had to draw it back down to process driven, right? So the things you can control. I need to swim fast, I need to ride fast, run fast, but how am I going to do that within that leg? So like the early years was all about just trying to make as much money as you could by going to races and trying it, I guess, dog eat dog. You want to be the top dog in Australia. So you're trying to etch your way to those top guys who sometimes come complacent, who are getting the bigger funding, don't have to fight as hard at those higher races because they've got a salary in a sense from the government. So it was a real interesting way. I think it was a good way to learn your craft because you saw the ones that, say, for instance, didn't have the financial backing from their parents. They had that more ruthless mentality.
Yeah, they got the dog.
Yeah, so it was like, it was an interesting, I guess, progression in high performance sport.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
an eye opener. And I guess a lot of that set me up for life later. where at the time you don't realise. Yeah.
That's the big thing. Like I find that, you know, I look at sort of what Black Ink's become in the past 5 years, and you go, well, there's been a bunch of like things that have happened, and when they happen in the moment, they're usually pretty devastating. Like, fuck, how am I going to recover? But you do recover. Then the next big thing happens. You're like, how am I going to? But you do recover, and this happens and happens and happens. And then I look at those as a group, and I'm like, well, where did that come from? Like the ability to just like pick up all your shit off the ground and just go, I'm going to keep being a winner. It's like, well, if you're going to be a winner, like in sport, doesn't matter how many times you fall, you have to get up. You can be in the middle of a race, you've fallen, you got to get up, you got to finish a race. Like it's not even an option of like, well, now I've got to stop. It's like, unless something is broken or you genuinely can't do it, you have to do it. You know, and I feel like when you find out that winners or like successful people in life were athletes in their, especially adolescence, for me, I'm like, oh, of course. You know, that wiring of just like, I've got to keep doing this until it works. And even then when it works, I've got to get better again. It's like that seems to be an innate thing that is just like embedded in you as an athlete, I reckon.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you see, obviously now in my line of work, like I would always be like, I want to push myself as hard as I can in say some sort of exercise you're doing.
Yeah.
I guess being an athlete, like you just want to get the most out of every opportunity. But then I guess you have people who haven't had that exposure or that need or desire to find that next level. You're like, come on, you got more in you. And it's not until they're like, I actually do. But it's because they've never had to expose themselves to that level. Yeah,
like you just seem like a crazy person in that moment as well. They're like, no, I can't. It's like, you literally can. You just need to push, you know?
Yeah, so it's interesting on that I think like, I don't know, when I was racing, you had 65 of the best guys on the start list. You're all doing the same training. Sure, there might be some slightly different technique or you're all there because you're physically capable. But it's like that last 5% you needed was all mental.
Yeah, for sure.
And it wasn't until later on in my career I worked quite closely with a sports psych. I was always like, I don't need a sports psych. I've got nothing wrong upstairs. Like I'm a normal functioning athlete. Yeah. But there are actually times like where the sports psych helped me in certain scenarios to get the most out of yourself or push that next level. So
what was that? Well, I mean, what were sort of the things that you took away from, if you took all your performance up till sitting with a sports psychologist, like that's what?
Yeah, just a sports psych, I think they're mostly called. Yeah.
Are they giving you like techniques to deal with your own mind better? Or is it like visualization, or what sort of things are you getting out of that?
Yeah, so it took me a while to actually find the right sports psych in my career. Like had a heap and I was like, not quite the right fit. But then met this one guy, his name was actually Jason Patchell, rolled in on a skateboard, long hair. I think at the time he might even had dreadies. And I just felt an instant click with him.
Yep.
And with him, we used to work a lot on process driven. So you used to have your race plan. It wasn't about, I want to be first. Of course, everyone wants to be first, but it's like, how are you going to arrive at that scenario?
Yep.
So say for the swim, obviously we have 65 dudes standing in a start line. You're about to dive into the water. You might get punched in the head in the first stroke.
Yeah.
So it's like, how are you going to get out the quickest?
Yep.
So just thinking about I used to think about the first 10 strokes of a swim, and then check in with my technique, say about halfway around, just don't forget you're swimming roughly 1,500 meters.
Yep.
And then you're not thinking about the bike ride until you come out of the water. It's like, how am I now going to be the quickest through transition to get my bike? And then bike, you might have a couple cues. But the biggest one was running, because obviously running's quite, I don't know, there comes points where you have good moments, bad moments. Like you're at the end of like an hour and a half of racing, and it's just, as soon as the mind wants to stop, it's saying, just keep working on your arm swing, leg turnover.
Yeah.
Those were the types of things we worked on. So it was interesting from that perspective that it was hard to, you always caught yourself drifting, but then you had to bring yourself back into the moment.
Interesting.
Using those sort of techniques.
Yep.
Like, because a lot of it is automatic, you're racing, but then it's just squeezing that little bit more out of yourself, catching yourself, because obviously drifting in and out of attention span within the race is fine.
Yeah.
But it's being in that present moment at that time when the push comes to shove.
How are
the
you
techniques to deal with it?
Yeah. So you said then like drifting in and out of the moment. Why? Because you're doing like how long's your average triathlon?
So they used to, when I was racing, Olympic distance was just a 1.5k swim, 40k bike, and 10k run. Now obviously they've changed formats. You got a sprint distance and a mixed teams relay, which is kind of cool because you're triathlons was always an individual sport.
Whoa,
even though you
okay.
had your like team around you.
Yeah.
But it was pretty much like 4 mini triathlons in a relay. So you have like a male goes, female goes, male goes, female goes.
Oh, that's got so many different fucking elements to it.
Yeah, so that only came like late in my career.
Yeah.
But was another way for triathlon to get an extra sport in the Olympics.
You would feel like going from a standard distance to now where minimizing that distance and doing it over and over and over, you would have felt like an animal then, because you would have been over prepared.
Yeah, but it also flip side, like obviously racing the Olympic distance used to have more endurance space. So you're peaking in your mid 30s, right? Early 30s. Because you're racing just under 2 hours.
Right.
But then all of a sudden they were like, oh, maybe we need like a more specialized athlete. So something short like that, because the distance now was, like a 300 meter swim, 8K bike, 2K run.
Wow.
You all of a sudden had these junior whippets coming through who have a lot of speed to burn.
17-year-old who's long and lanky
Yeah.
and knows how to move. Yeah, okay.
So that's when you're saying like my career kind of ended abruptly, as like 2020 was the first year they were actually bringing in the mixed teams relay.
Right.
So all of a sudden, say your country only gets 2 spots, they weren't necessarily now giving it, say, just to the Olympic distance guys.
Yeah.
Because your same team, your same guys that race the Olympic distance, they then had to be used for your relay. So all of a sudden now you had nations going, funding is dictated by medals at the Olympics.
Okay.
So they were like, our best chance is we've got no one good enough at the Olympic distance to medal. We need to put all our eggs into the mixed teams relay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand like the importance the Olympics has on nations and the way that they perceive themselves and other nations. Like the Olympics is really the only sort of like governed thing where everyone is sort of on the same playing field, or meant to be on the same playing field, and it's a real clear, like, America has the best this, Russia has the best that, China has the best that, Australia has the best that. You know, so I think a lot of people who don't have that athlete background or mentality or understanding of like what it means for the athlete, it's like if you do well in the Olympics, to your country, you are literal like gold. You know, so I think that point of view of like, oh, we're not just going to put Ryan in because we like Ryan. It's we're going to put this guy in or whoever in because they give us the best possible chance at representing our country on this stage, and us being able to say we are a superpower because we have so much money and so much resources that we can even make our swimmers, our this, our that, the best in the world. So it's a really interesting sort of dynamic to go like, well, I've spent my whole life being good at this one thing, and now all of a sudden someone who's really fucking good on the bike is now going to play this role even though there's swimming and running involved.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like the Olympics, Games, any of those sports, like everyone becomes like a couch critic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they bring like, and this is where it's hard as an athlete because they bring the whole of the country together.
Yeah.
But your funding, say, goes over a 4-year period. But if one sport has a flop, their funding diminishes. Oh. But it's like you see how much it brings to a country. So you got to think you've got then 4 years of funding from based off that Olympics or world champs or whatever that KPI might be for that sport that year.
Yeah.
But then the detriment of that is obviously you've got younger athletes coming through who will necessarily maybe walk away from the sport or whatever because there's no funding to help them get to that next Olympics. So that's, I think, somewhere in Australia, like, sure, we've got a great country. We've got so many things to spend money on, but you see what it does to get people moving during the Olympics. And I mean, someone moving's a healthier person. I sometimes think there could be more spent at like sporting levels to keep that trajectory. Yeah. Because everyone loves the winner, right? In Australia, typically. Sure. And everyone's captivated by the Olympics or whatever it is. And it does get people moving. Like when the Olympics are on, that's all people talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Like this year it was all about that breakdance. So do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You might have not necessarily seen her breakdance, but it was a topic of conversation.
You knew what was going on.
Yeah, or the skateboarding or whatever it was within it.
Yeah.
People like for that 3 or 2.5 weeks have the TV on watching.
Yeah. So. I just want to go back to so remind me what the standard triathlon distances are.
So, well, what's government funded by AIS is an Olympic distance. So it's 1.5K swim, 40K bike, 10K run. Okay. And how long does that, what's your sort of average, or let's say, what's your PB in that distance? So it's hard to like PB because obviously courses are different. But typically it was taking about an hour 50. Used to swim in so you used to swim about 18 minutes, say, sometimes quicker, 17, 16, just depends. Yeah. For 1500. And then the bike riding, obviously you're drafting, so
Yeah.
you can sit on people's wheels, bit tactical.
Yeah.
You're riding in anything over 50 minutes. And then the run, you run for the dough or the money. Typically just over 30 minutes. So I think I went like a 30, 40, 10K.
Hectic.
Yeah. So these days they're like under, like to give you names, like I think to win Tokyo, to win Paris just gone, it was just under, they were close to 29 low for 10K.
Wow. So I know, like, for the little bit of running, heap of cycling and heap of skating I've done, like I was a marathon skater, so typically you're skating for 50 to 65 minutes, typically you're doing a marathon in. Like 60, 70% of that, I was completely detached from like Jake, life, anything outside of just like what's going on in that race. You know, like flow state essentially.
Yeah.
How often are you, like, that's a significant amount of time longer, and also you're doing like, skating is the same, it's very repetitive, you know what I mean? Swimming, it's just arms, legs. Cycling, it's just running, is just, you know, elbows and knees. What's your average mind state? Like what are you going over typically in just an average moment in a triathlon?
Yeah, most of it would be like you said, that flow state, I guess, with it. It's only when the going gets tough, I guess, that's when you're drifting back into it. And it's how you deal with that situation when we say back to those processes that you had written down on that piece of paper before that you're always practicing.
Yep.
But also, like, one of my best coaches, he always made you exceed the demands of competition in training.
Okay, cool.
So you used to train a lot harder than what the race was. Yeah. So you were prepared, do you know what I mean? And he used to put you in these weird scenarios. You're like, what's this guy doing? He's lost his marbles, sort of thing. But it wasn't until later on you're like, oh, he's actually preparing us for that situation when it arises at the race. So you're not like, what's going on, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were always, I mean, we trained in an international squad too. So it was by an Australian coach, but then there was internationals there to keep you on your toes. So you're not just like Australia versing Australians in training.
Yeah.
You want to be the world's best. So how do you be the world's best? You get international guys in.
Yeah, you put yourself in the demo of the world, I guess.
So where you had, like, for instance, the Olympic gold medalists in the female side training in our squad. So you saw what the world's best were doing. They were like literally living with you. So there was no excuses why you couldn't be the world's best because you're seeing what they do day in, day out. Yeah. But then it was also good when you're getting, like, not lazy, but complacent. You're like, what would Gwen be doing? Or what would someone else be doing in this state? So yeah, that was always an interesting fact or an interesting side of training is, just trying to exceed the demands of competition. So you're never like, I've never been here before. Yeah.
I've never gone into this dark corner of my mind where I hate that. Why did I ever decide to be a skater? Why did I ever decide to be a marathon skater? You know, it's like, I've already been here in training. I've already put the money in the bank. Now I'm just spending my savings.
Yeah. And racing was always, I don't know, I used to love it because it's a combination of like, you're handing in that big project.
Yeah.
So say, like, sure, sometimes you might have to race when it wasn't planned or it wasn't on your schedule, but as your career grew and you're like now one of the top dogs, I guess, you could actually pick your season. And we used to have like 8 races in a season, 6 would count. You might do a couple other races for money or whatever.
Yeah. Handing in that big project is such a great, I've never heard that.
Yeah, so that's what it always felt like. You'll literally, like, say you'd fly from, because most of the time we raced in the same big cities around the world. Yeah. You'd know, Tuesday we're flying, say, to Canada. We got a race in Edmonton. And it's like the end of that project. Then as soon as you got on the plane, that project's finished. You got to start your next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unreal. Just like, here's what I've been working on, boys. Fucking check this out.
Yeah. And I mean, our season started back in January in terms of training. We always went up to Falls Creek, up to a bit of altitude at 1,600 meters. Yeah. Might have slept in altitude tents up there as well.
How did you respond to altitude training?
Not too bad. I mean, I didn't get the best benefit out of it. Some people go off the Richter scale when you're getting like your blood work monitored and that type of thing. It's always a tricky one. Like, you come down from altitude to sea level. Obviously, for those who've got no idea what we're talking about, you've just got less oxygen to work with up there. So your body's working harder. So
you're essentially training your body to use more of the oxygen that is in your blood. So then when you come back, you're over oxygenated. You can go for longer, harder.
Yeah, well, you should theoretically be able to push that a little bit. Like years and years ago, altitude was kind of like banned, similar to caffeine.
It's crazy. It's like an EPO.
Yeah. So, and especially like some countries now still, I think, like synthetic altitude. So sleeping in an altitude tent over your bed, that's still banned in some countries.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So we used to sleep in an altitude tent. So you'd train, I think Falls Creek's about 1,800 meters.
Yeah.
And then sleep at like 3.5. So yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Did you have any like real, obviously when you're in the midst of training, you're very much like any sort of growth that you're feeling is like almost like 0.5% at a time. Did you have anything that you did in your career where you're like, wow, I actually genuinely feel fitter, stronger, faster, whatever, from like maybe a week or a month's worth of specific training? Was there anything that like stands out?
I think the biggest thing was you always got on like, not that I got on heaps of rolls, but you always got on a roll where the confidence was high. And you could be training really well, but if you're not racing well, that's where the confidence dwindles. You've got no self-belief anymore.
Yeah,
that were probably the hardest bit. But then when you're in that real flow state, you're performing well, training well, life's good, everything seems easy. But it's when you're in that other state, it's like everything feels hard. You feel like you're grinding. You're like, what am I doing this for? I'm not like, and then it's hard. It's even harder when you're training well, but then not producing the results.
Did you have a moment where you had crossed over from being someone who did triathlons to being a triathlete, do you think?
Well, I guess growing up, I wanted to be that AFL footy player, like played football for South Bunbury up until I was, I think, 17.
Yep.
And won a couple of best and fairest, but just wasn't big enough. Right. Put on more beef. Obviously, I could run all day, so I was pretty good in the midfield and out on the wing. And then used to do triathlon sort of in the summer to keep fit for football. And then there just came a cross point where I was like, I'm actually not bad at this triathlon gig. Why don't we give it a crack?
Interesting. So you're born in 91?
1990. Yeah.
True. So you're 2 years older than me. So that all started when you were 17. Hectic. You got serious when I like left skating pretty much.
Yeah. So finished school because I was a year older. So finished 18 and then ended that year, relocated to New South Wales.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I swore I trained with you. Oh, okay. So you're already doing triathletes as cross training for footy.
For footy, yeah. So you used to do like a bit of riding and that.
Dude, you're an animal on the bike before you started doing it seriously. Of course. I guess you have to be, right?
Yeah, I guess everyone's got some sort of hidden talent. It's just finding what you're good at. And I guess that was something I was naturally a bit gifted.
Dude, without blowing wind up my own ass, I'm pretty strong on a bike. Like I've always been organically strong on a bike. I was strong in skating. I was always a workhorse. I was always better at distance stuff. And like I stuffed around on the weekend on a push bike as cross training. You were like not A level. You were like unforeseeable away from my fitness level then. So I can't imagine once you mix that into the AIS and like really having purpose-driven sort of training, how that would have like eventuated. Was the bike your strongest point, do you feel?
Yeah, it was. And like one of the coaches along the way, he kind of had a fight with my coach at the time. I actually ended up with this coach towards the end of my career because he wanted me to pursue solely cycling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think like even looking back now, had you told me to pursue cycling, I probably would have got bored of it. The good thing about triathlon is you're always trying to master 3 sports.
Yeah.
So sure, you might have been amazing at the bike, but it's like, hey, what about the swim?
Yeah.
And the swim was always my weakness. So that was where the real challenge lied. Because obviously on the bike we could draft like they do at the Tour de France. You had to be in that front echelon.
Yep.
Otherwise your day was done. So
yeah, because by that point, if you're not there, you're not going to catch back up.
It's like you're already on the back foot. Sometimes it would come back together depending on the courses.
Yeah.
Depending who we had to work in that second pack. But I was always hit and miss whether I would make the first pack. But then obviously the run was quite strong. So I knew once I was on dry land, I'd be all right. But I mean, I didn't really swim as a kid growing up. So
yeah.
I only discovered swimming later, and then had to really work at it when I first moved across to New South Wales, that I was swimming like 60, 70K weeks, plus still having a bike and run.
Damn, dude, that's a lot of kilometres for a human in water.
Yeah, so you pretty much grew gills, hair turned green from all the chlorine.
Yeah.
Yeah, stunk like chlorine. Yeah.
Unreal. So what's the, like, were you competing in cycling?
We used to do like a couple of road races. Like I did like the bigger ones in Australia, like Grafton and Apparel they used to have, which was one of the oldest ones, which is about, what was that, just over 200K stage race.
Yep.
So he started in a small town, Grafton, climbed up a big ass hill and then finished in Inverell.
Yeah, right.
Did like another big one, Goulburn, Sydney. So did a few cycle races, but it was all kind of to complement triathlon.
Yeah.
And you just used to do like say focus training where this month we're just focusing more on riding.
Yep.
Sure, we'll still swim and run, but we'll just do bigger bike Ks. So,
right.
And we used to do things like criteriums, road running, races.
Criterium's good for the soul, man. Criterium is like, I feel like if you're a good cyclist, the criterium is like what every boy wants to do. It's just a race, you know?
Yeah, and get the elbows out. And yeah, so like we used to do quite a bit of that as just because it pushes you out your comfort zone, and then keeps adding to that skill repertoire. And then, like I said before, like exceeding the demands of competition. So
you're really building like a peripheral amount of skill then onto your cycling, because you're like, we're not just good in a straight line for 40Ks, we're good at like cornering and this and this. And
as the sports progress, like triathlon's still a young sport, right? It's only been in the Olympics since 2000. So you've only had...
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so it only came in Sydney. And still to this day, no Australian male has won a medal. We've won on the female side.
Yep.
But the best performance by an Australian male was 4th at the Olympics. I think back in 2004. So...
Wow, okay. So we're a distance away as yet.
Yeah, and as a triathlon, like back in the day, it used to just be Australia, Great Britain, the Kiwis were all right. Where now it's like an actual multifaceted sport. Like we're having a Norwegian in Tokyo win the Olympics.
Okay.
So, but before, like that would have typically been a winter like skiing country or something like that. So triathlons, it's over the years, it's just twofold exploded kind of
thing.
thing.
The rest of the world said that when Stephen Bradbury won that gold medal as well. Just like Australia has an ice rink, like you know. Talk to me about your running. I saw a few clips of you running on your Instagram, and it's like, I mean, obviously you have to be quite a technical runner or athlete in general in your discipline, but you look so effortless. Like it looks like everything's just sort of falling onto the next thing, you know. Is that something that was always natural to you, or is it learnt, or is it a bit of both?
Running was always natural. Obviously, growing up like around here, cross country club, runners club on a Thursday night, like always did that as a kid. But again, like later on as your career progresses, it's like, how do we need that next percent? You're always looking for that next percent. Yeah. And slowly worked with this skill acquisition guy from the AAS.
Yep.
We used to train in Wollongong over the summer. He used to drive down from Canberra. It's not that far. I think it's like 3 hour drive.
Right.
Used to work closely with him for 2 hours. He had no vested interest in triathlon. He's just purely about skills.
Yep.
So he would literally go for a run, video us, would then stop. He'd be like, I want you to try and do this with your hips, this with your hips, this with your hips, think about this.
Yep.
And he would slowly try and morph your technique to be more efficient.
Interesting.
So that's where you get that end product looking good on Instagram.
Yeah. Like it was literally annoying watching him. I'm like, I can't believe I know this guy and he runs that well.
But I guess the biggest part of it is like at the end of the day, if you're training 35 hours a week as your full-time job, you'd want to look pretty good at it. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, some people can make running look ugly and still be fast. But I mean, you watch the Kenyans run, like that's like next level.
Yeah.
Effortless. It's like they were born to run.
Yeah. Yeah. And you look at their you know, like their kilometer speeds, you're like, this is my full fucking sprint.
Yeah.
And they're doing it for like how many hours?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think like the record at the minute for the marathon, if you jump on a treadmill, crank that thing up, I think even the ones at the sports center don't even go fast enough. Like you've literally, I think it's like 22K now. That treadmill's got to sit on.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And for how long? I mean, what's
so
it?
Just over 2 hours.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Or 42Ks just keep. Yeah.
And seemingly, obviously, to be a distance runner, you have nothing on you anyway. You're like, what are the possible energy stores that your body is using to maintain that just constant turnover, you know? I mean, I guess with good technique, you're using less energy as well, but it still doesn't make sense that there's nothing of them and they're going for 2 hours, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like you say, like some people are talented at certain aspects of life. I think a lot of them were just talented to run.
Yeah.
And that's why they make it so effortless. But then again, they've got a group around them and you'd literally go for a run there and say there's like 100 people. They're all like that same level. And it's just that pack mentality that one's just the best out of all of them. But there's a whole pack around them that are training.
Yeah. Well, I mean, John Jones is the youngest of 3 brothers and he's like, man, my older brothers beat the shit out of me. And then you're like, oh, you're the best pound for pound fighter in the world though. And it's like, your average rises, like you're saying before, if you're training with this person who's a gold medalist from this country and that person who's a gold medalist for whatever from that country, it's like your average is actually rising just by being around people that are better than you. And that completely crosses over into business.
Yeah.
Like if you want a better business, hang out with people who have better businesses with you and listen to what they talk about.
Yeah.
Like it's literally that simple.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I feel like that's the craziest thing that like I've found with my business is like there's only so much we can get from listening to podcasts and you know, reading these books and doing these things. It's like, go hang out with other people who not even do things in similar industries, but are just like in the same demo as you and have the same like general direction and aspiration as you. It's like, hey, I'm dealing with this staff problem, or I'm dealing with this cash flow problem. Then you get someone who's 2 years ahead of you in business. They're like, oh, I had that as well 2 years ago. Just do this. And then you just do this and it works.
Yeah.
You know?
I think, like you said, like-minded people, because you do get, like, even during my sporting career, you got people that are like, he's never going to be good enough. You get those people that are like, even with your business, like, that's never going to work, mate. Like, what are you doing just to knock you down?
Yeah.
But it's like they're not living your dream or what you want to do. So it's always like surround yourself like-minded people because they've been there, done that.
Yep.
Or have, like you said, faced the same obstacles.
Yeah. It's so crazy as well that, and I feel like as well, you know, applies on both. And that is the kind of overarching theme here, is like what applies in business typically stands to apply in sport, the sporting life as well. You can't, like, in its most simplest form, the lion doesn't worry about the opinion of the sheep, you know? Like, I've had plenty of people, I'll tell them my ideas of like, Black Ink's weird because I don't really have anyone else who's doing what I'm doing. Like, there's no one else really in Bunbury that has a podcast that, you know, is doing what I'm doing. There's no one that decorates uniforms in the method that I decorate uniforms. So I don't really have these businesses where I'm like, how did you do it in your uniform decoration business, you know? So when I say, like, I'm going to buy a DTF printer, and you have, you know, you kind of share ideas with, say, 10 people, and you just sort of gauge what sort of responses. You're like, well, this person thinks it's a silly idea to spend $40,000 on a printer that no one else has. And this person over here is saying, like, an innovative technology that you're going to be the industry leader and no one else is going to have that. Brother, do that and figure out as much as you possibly can and be that leader in that industry. You know, okay, this person over here works for a wage and this person over here is an innovator and industry leader in their industry. So it's like, well, I'm going to pay attention to the other lion and I might just let the sheep keep being a sheep, you know? But even that's a skill of its own as well. Yeah.
And I mean, that's like generally in life, like, do you know what I mean? You're always, not calculated risk because I was always a bit more of a risk taker.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was even interesting. Like, obviously going, like Hilary going into GloFit, right? Like, a lot of it, like, I came from blue collar worker sort of family, and having your own business, it's like, you don't, not that you don't make money doing that, but it was more risk involved as
opposed
opposed
to guaranteed paycheck.
Yeah, as opposed to, like, say being a nurse, or you're always going to get guaranteed work somewhere in the world or in the country. So that, I guess, like, that's what was maybe not harder to start GloFit, but like a lot of people are like, oh, you're not going to go to university now, you're sort of finished. Yeah.
I want to get into GloFit because I've got 100 questions there for you. But your mum and sister are both super athletes as well. That's correct?
Yeah. So I had my younger sister. She was actually touted to be better than me.
Unreal.
As an athlete. So she was actually in 2000. Anyway, she was junior world champ under 19. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Silver medalist. I'm getting it all wrong. Silver medalist. And then she was touted on a quicker trajectory to get to the Olympics pretty much than me. Long story short, I guess fell out of love with the sport.
Yeah.
Got to a point where she's like teetering but not really making money. Is this really what I want to do? And then before heading overseas, one year got cleaned up by a car. Out training, went through a windscreen, whatever else. And laying
cycling.
Laying in that hospital bed, away from your family in New South Wales. I think I was already in Europe. I was away, no one around you. Kind of thought, is this really what I want to be?
Did you sustain any significant injuries from that?
No, just all superficial. Obviously, glass, like, she's still got scars now from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then that was her, like, turning point. Kind of, I want to come home, study, and ended up studying to be a vet. So I think she kind of got to that point, and a lot of athletes do. Your early 20s, you see kids you went to school with, slowly finishing degrees, starting sort life out.
Having a family, buying a house.
Yeah, and you're like living this life out of a suitcase, trying to make ends meet. Am I going to make money next week? Am I not? Like, sort of thing. And then it not that it gets scary or daunting, but I think that's where we lose a lot of athletes, even in Australia, because there's not that next level of support sometimes.
Dude,
and a lot
we
of people
talk about it in triathlon. Talk about skating.
Well, that's what I mean, like any sport.
Yeah.
And that's where you really find those that are like willing to sort of like risk it all.
Yeah.
So yeah, like she was obviously a good athlete, twin sister. I mean, we're all just a fit family, really.
Yeah, yeah.
My mum used to do like comrades for anyone that's 100K running race in South Africa.
Huge.
One year they run upwards.
Yep.
And next year's a downhill. So she was 4th in that 1 year.
Yeah.
So I guess there's good genetics there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's, again, it's talking about those averages rising when mum and sis are out training hard and you're not. You'd be like, well, maybe I should get out there as well, you know?
Yeah.
What's were you born and bred in Bunbury?
So I grew up in South Africa and then we emigrated when I was 6.
Oh, okay.
And then, like you said, I think at the start of the pod, school, Adam Road.
Yep.
And then went across to Newton Mall.
Do you have many memories of life in South Africa?
Nah, not much.
No. So life pretty much started here for you.
Yeah. Obviously started, and that's why I stayed back a year, because I pretty much would have gone halfway through year 2 with no schooling. Okay. So went halfway through year 1, and that was the first bit of schooling I had.
Right.
But not too many memories of South Africa.
Yeah. Is there many trips back now as an adult that you've done?
Not really, because I got no family. The first time I went back was actually to race there. 18 years later as a 24-year-old.
Yeah. I'm actually from here, guys.
Yeah. And it was kind of interesting going back, and I didn't ever really, it's just, I guess, because there's no real, I see myself as an Australian. Yeah. There's like no family back there.
And obviously you race for Australia.
Yeah, there's nothing that ties me to South Africa anymore. Sure, it's where I was born, but even as a 6-year-old moving out, you've got such vague memories.
Yeah.
That it's not like you moved when you're 15, 16, you still got friends over there, family. So it's like my life was all of a sudden instantly here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, what's the collection of medals that you've got that are significant? What are your sort of like Commonwealth, Olympic, what are the best positions that you held when you did, and how many world championships have you done?
Oh, I think I did about 13 elite.
Wow.
Yeah, or including under 23. So, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so our sport kind of worked different towards, because they kind of, like I was saying, they did a series. Yeah. So you used to have, I think it was about 8 races in a series. 6 would count, or say 5 would count, plus your grand final, which was the world championship.
Yep.
Used to, and then, so for a number of years there, I think, I can't remember how many times, but I was in the top 5 quite maybe 4 years in a row sort of thing, or 3 years. And that's your overall ranking pretty much in the year. The biggest, I guess you talk about mental capacity and that. I had quite a few chances where I should have been on the podium, but just didn't have that next mental gear to switch to convert it into a podium. Yeah. Like I think I went something like 15 races straight where you're in the top 10. So super consistent. Yeah. But it was like you're 6th, 7th, 4th, 5th.
Yeah.
You weren't quite there. Yeah. So I never cracked like podiums, and I think it's just some people learn to win. I never learned how to win. Yeah. If that makes sense. So when you're in a group sprint finish or whatever, or that next push to shove, I think I probably worked with a sports psych too late in my career. And then when I worked with him, there was only a couple times I put myself in that position to win or to podium. Yeah. And the other athlete was just better.
There's so many levels there. There's like just showing up, just finishing, just being in the front peloton, and then just being in the sprint, and then getting on the podium, and then winning. It's like everything is like a year, a year more of training. And for the couch critic sitting at home going like, fucking, he's barely trying. It's like, brother, do you understand like how difficult it is just to be in the position that I'm in? Yeah.
And then I guess also when I was around, we had the generational athletes. You always hear about this. They were the next best thing. But everyone's probably heard of it, the Brownlee brothers. One's just retired. So they revolutionized the sport, same age as me. One's 2 years older, one's the same age, one's still going. Yeah. And they just changed the way the sport was transitioning to it's just a flat out from the swim all the way through. So that probably hindered, because I think they never missed a podium when they were racing sort of thing if they weren't injured.
Damn.
And you've got 2 brothers, so you only really got 1 spot left. You then had a couple of Spanish guys that were excellent in that time. One was a 5-time world champ. Yep. So it was real generational athletes that changed the guard. But I mean, back to what you said, medals, like Com Games bronze medalist in mixed teams relay. So that was the first time we touched on it briefly, where you're racing in a team
rather than just being by yourself.
Just by yourself. Yeah. And then the other 2 was 2 silvers at mixed teams relay world champs. So and they're probably the 3 that I look back fondly on.
Is there like a perspective shift once you have podium? You're like, all right, there is another level. I'm now on that level.
Yeah, and it's also like I guess because our team orientated medals, like you had 4 in the team, you wanted to then do it for yourself. Yeah. But I just never had that next gear to be able to do that, I guess, when the situation arises. So that's racing. That's life. Not everyone can be a winner.
I was going to say, so how does it feel sitting here now where you're like, I'm out of the game, I didn't have that next year. Do you have any like wishful thinking that you're like, I wish I had done this stage a year earlier. I wish I had maybe taken this opportunity when I dipped out of it. Or are you just sort of like, cool, hands off the wheel, I done what I done?
Yeah, I was kind of like, I guess there was no even big like announcement I've retired. So that's how quietly I stepped away. But that's always been my nature. Like I probably could have got more sponsors had I been more out there on Instagram, had I but it wasn't my nature.
Yeah.
I was always like, just go about your work quietly, get it done. Sure, it probably cost me later on in my career because you didn't capitalize on what you could have as an athlete.
Yeah.
But no, very much just walked away happy with what I was done. But then not that there's any regret. It's like, I wonder, have I just done that different? But that's normal in life, right?
Yeah.
It's not that I have regret how I lived it or did my sporting career. It just is what it is. And those were the cards you were dealt and that's how you dealt with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I still look back and I was like, man, that went quick. It was like, what, a 14-year career or whatever it was. And then you're all of a sudden done. And a lot of sports people say that. They're like, oh, enjoy it, goes fast. You're like, oh, whatever, old man sort of thing.
Yeah,
but I'm
doing 60 Ks on the bike tomorrow. That's not going to go fast, you know?
Yeah, but it actually does go quick. I mean, any of those periods, like, yeah. Yeah.
My year in Europe, that felt like a month.
Yeah. So
you know, I did more racing in that year than I did the rest of my skating career leading up to it. And then I was on the plane back and I remember that some of the things you've said really resonated this thought to me. Like I remember being on the plane and going like, I hadn't told anyone, but I knew I was never going to skate. Like that was it. I wasn't going to do nationals. I wasn't going to do states. I wasn't going to do anything local. Like that was it. I was done. And it scared me so much because I had no idea who I was other than a skater. You know, it's like I got to go and get a job and a rental. You know, like at this point I've never, you know, I'm a virgin. I've never dated anyone. I had like, you know, a couple of girlfriends that were skating partners when I was doing artistic skating back in the day. But I hadn't drunk.
Yeah.
And I'm 18.
Yeah.
And like I've had this amazing experience that most people never had, but I'm like, that's all I know.
Yeah.
All I know is how to wear a skin suit, put on a helmet and go beat people.
Yeah.
You know? And even that, in the grand scheme of things, I wasn't that good at. That's why I was quitting. Yeah. You know, because I'm like, the 1% difference between me and where I want to be is like so much money and effort and time. And I just don't want to keep donating myself to this thing that I'm not fully in anymore, you know? So yeah, it's a mind fuck, the athlete thing when you're in it thinking this is going to last forever. And then when you're not in it, you're like, that barely lasted any time at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I mean, it was like a good time. And like I said, no regrets sort of for how you sort of, and then, I guess life has now started in a different way.
Yeah. I think the crazy thing about that is like I've really found the like art or skill, whatever you want to call it, of reflecting. And I really thought after I finished skating, I'm like, well, that's the best part of my life done. You know, everyone talks about your teenage years and your youth being the best thing. And I was like, oh, all right, cool. Then I found partying and just went as hard as I possibly could for what I felt like as long as I could. And then I sort of like put that behind me because I could feel myself killing myself with, you know, fatigue and drugs and alcohol. And I thought, oh, that's the best part of my life done. And now it's like deciding to get back into business and then going like, oh, I always want to have a podcast. I'm going to do that. I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to do that. And now it feels like the good shit hasn't really even started yet. It's like I did this pre-apprenticeship that was being an athlete and then this apprenticeship being in my early 20s and coffee van and, you know, this and that and the other. And now I finally get to start as a tradesman of like life. You know, it's like you're 30-something-year-old, you've got a little community, you've got a little bit of like some things you can move around and play with. And it's like now I've got some like acumen to work with and some real like elements in life to move around and have fun with. And it's like, oh, now it's starting to get exciting.
Yeah. And that's like, obviously I walked away from the sport with no physical degree or anything. I mean, I said I got into sports science at Murdoch and never kept deferring to a point I was like, there's no point because I'm not going to go do it as my career progressed. So sure, I like never left the sport with a degree, but the knowledge that you take from just situations in life far outweighs in my head anyway. Some people probably do like, yeah, whatever, mate. But outweighs what you can potentially learn in four walls or inside a classroom. So. Your
communication skills traveling and racing compared to your average bear would be night and day different for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I probably couldn't walk in and just do an engineering role. I'm not saying that, but you just what you learn in terms of street smart or whatever, like the rest of your life. Like, there's one coach said to me, like the rest of your life, Ryan, is going to be simple or so much easier to what you're in now in this athlete world.
Yeah.
Because of how you've learnt discipline. There's so many other attributes you've learnt along the way that will set you up for the rest of your life. And at the time I was like, not quite sure on that. I think I still need to go to university or do some sort of degree or do something.
It kind of feels like you still have a bit of that feeling in you, to be honest. Like the way you're communicating it is like maybe there's this, like I look at people who go to university, I'm like, you wasted 4 years and got heaps of debt. I'm in the University of Hard Knocks right now doing the thing, losing, winning, moving, progressing. And realistically, life is, in my opinion, essentially sales. If you can sell, it doesn't matter what your skills behind it are, you'll be fine. You sell Pilates, I sell podcasts and T-shirts. That's not going to be what I'm selling forever. But my ability to walk into a room and make that person like me and give me their money, that's what it comes down to. You know?
And that's what someone said to us once. He's like, Ryan, if you're going to be successful, you know how the hardest job out there is being a telemarketer. He said, if you can sell something being a telemarketer, you can make it anywhere. Because you think the short time span, like literally I see a number, don't even answer it anymore. Yeah. But you think like how small their time frame is to try and hook you to get a sale done. Yeah. It's like, and he's like, if you want to do something hard and see if you've got it, go and do telemarketing for like even just a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah, 100%. The wild part about that is a telemarketer would definitely give up at hour fucking, hour number or an hour and 20 into a triathlon going like, what am I doing here? Yeah. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
It's interesting. Your sponsorships. So what does a sponsorship look like? Are you going and getting them? Are they coming to you after a win? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a misconception. Like you think you're an athlete, all of a sudden everyone's just going to be like kissing your shoes and next thing you've got 10 bikes hanging up in the shed or something like that. But a lot of them, like any sort of relationship, starts out really basic, might just be purely product. Hey, can you wear like, we'll sign a deal, we'll give you 15 shoes a year. Yeah. And then it slowly progresses from there. So next thing all of a sudden you've got 60 shoes sitting around and bonuses, like I'll give you a bonus if you're on the podium here. Yeah.
Do you have like one standout massive, like, whoa, I can't believe I got this from a sponsor moment, like money or product?
I mean, I've still got like an Italian company who still sends me bikes just out of goodwill sort of thing.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I was with ASICS for a number of years. They were sort of like, we'll keep sending you product, but it's like, hey, I'd rather give it to the junior. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I know how tough it is as a junior, like $200 for a set of sneakers.
Huge.
And you look at how much running wise injuries are from, not having the right equipment. So I'd rather give those because I've got, not that I'm going to buy 15 pairs of shoes a year, but you now got the money that you can go and buy a set of shoes. Yeah. It's like I'd rather give that to someone else. So sponsorship wise, like starting out young, there's only so much a company can give, I guess, or allocate towards sponsorship. And the thing that really killed it for athletes was all of a sudden Instagram. Sounds interesting, but all of a sudden you've got these socialites or whatever you want to call it. They would say post the absolute crap out of something. Yeah. And their audience is totally different to your captivating audience. So before like Facebook, Instagram and that came along, it's like sponsors, the only way to get out there was sort of like see someone racing, see someone you idolize. Yeah. Where then all of a sudden you've got these social influencers or whatever you want to call them. They will literally take 100 posts on that bike or say for a bike, for instance. And then all of a sudden, instead of that bike being the possession of the athlete to then on sell after that year, they'll be like, oh, I'll give the bike back to you. So then all of a sudden, like your sponsorship realms, they were like, hang on a second, we can get like 15 of these. They'll take a bike, give it back to us. Say an athlete will give them, say, 5 bikes a year. They're keeping them. Yeah. We've still got a percentage of sales from the bike and they've then flooded Instagram with a picture of the bike. So like in that sense, it kind of killed the athlete sponsorship in a way. Yeah.
There's more fiscal sense in going promote, give it back. We can then sell it for half of what it's worth. So we've got all this value and still the value for the bike compared to like, hey, Ryan, have a bike and try and win.
Yeah. So you used to like say get 2 bikes or whatever and then a retainer on top of that. Yeah. And then product, say, at the top. But then also you got this dog eat dog world where you got the younger kid coming up who's pretty good. He'll then undercut the big dogs and then that top dollar's then lost because of what they've accepted, if that makes sense. So say they've just won a world title. They've got no idea what the current market's worth. They've then undercut everyone and then it slowly starts diminishing from that aspect.
Yeah.
or it takes one athlete to ruin it all for everyone, whether they've done the wrong by someone.
Sometimes they don't even know.
No,
Yeah.
but and I guess sponsorships always came at their peak, coming to Games, coming into Olympics, because everyone wants to ride that wave. As soon as that's done, you're then a disposable commodity. We don't want to be on that train anymore, sorry, because of restructure, or the business is heading in a different direction.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. And that's just a volatile situation of elite sport.
Yeah, it's all very... That's when it turns from like support into business.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Like, you've got a business, they've probably got a return they've got to make. Hey, can we break into that market? Let's look at this sport. And for instance, like Woolworths, you used to walk in there, they used to have, because they're the sponsor of the Olympic team, I was on one of the billboards, it was a flat out $2,000. That's all they paid you. It didn't matter what athlete it was, $2,000 to be on a billboard for like that month. So you had some deals like that coming up to the Olympics. That's all it was. You couldn't ask for more. It's either take it or leave it. But for me, that was easy money.
And also, I'm on a billboard in Woolies.
Yeah, it wasn't the best looking picture. I mean, I didn't pick up more chicks or anything like that.
Yeah. Can I pick the photo? Because you're kind of fucking me here, you know?
I think I had swim cap and goggles on. So, but it's like, there I am.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I must admit, when you look at it from the business point of view, because I've had plenty of, dudes with burnout cars and shit, like, oh, can you sponsor me? And the first thing I do is like go on their page. I'm like, you have 150 followers.
Yeah.
What do I get from sponsoring you? Oh, I had the sticker on the windscreen. Like, I'll give you a sticker for free.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that does nothing for me. So if you look at it from the point of view, like ASICs are going like, okay, well, we can give Ryan shoes. Great. We can give Spanion 15 pairs of shoes, and he's going to talk about them every 4 minutes in his videos for the next 6 months. And then we're going to have a whole flock of Eshays buying ASICs instead of TNs.
Yeah.
So it's like, it really is, at the end of the day, it's like, what generates more sales? The sponsorship is not to help out the athlete. That is a byproduct of the business transaction that's going on. And unless ASICs is run by an actual ex-triathlete who goes, I know what the value of a $200 pair of shoes does for this athlete when they're in year 5 of maybe a 15-year career, and you can fully go, no, like, I want to do the right thing by the athlete. That's the whole idea of the sponsorship. That's not it at all. They're a business with a board trying to increase revenue every year without fail.
Yeah. And like, as you get older, you understand that perspective, but at your young age, you're like, oh, it's hard to get in that business mentality. And yeah, I guess like for one thing, probably, because I didn't put myself out there. Actually, one sponsor was the one who told me to get Instagram, and I was like, no, I'm not going to be that athlete. I don't want to be putting this is what I'm eating for breakfast. Look at me. That wasn't me. So that's where I say, like, I didn't capitalize on potentially what you could have made, and actually lost a sponsor over it, because I was so, in a way, I just wasn't interested in that side of being an athlete. Where nowadays, probably, like, if I had my career again, probably would have done it totally different, gone with the flow.
Yep.
So now when you look at it, like...
Oh, brother, don't you wish we could go back to 18 and just start posting anything every day? Like, the amount of shit that I didn't post because I'm like, oh, I'm a little bit... I don't like the angle, I don't like this, and then you'd go like 3 weeks of that posting. Now, I mean, even this morning I recorded some motivational shit, and I'm like, I'm such a dickhead, post it, and then you get 6 responses in the first like 5 minutes of it being up. You're like, oh, cool. If I had just been doing this for 10 years instead of 5 years, the business would have been so much further forward, because all you learn how to do is just go, well, this works, this doesn't, and I'm going to leverage off the things that do and do less of the things that don't, So, and as an athlete, you're already doing that.
Yeah.
I'm drinking 5 litres of water and I'm slowing down. I drink 3 litres of water and my hydration is bang on. I'm going to drink 3 litres of water, not 5, And
I think also for me, I couldn't be bothered with that side of thing, because I was like, that's not going to make me a better athlete.
Yeah.
I need to put my energy where it's going to make me a better athlete, whether it's getting to bed that little bit earlier, having that afternoon nap. And I was like posting about, well, in my eyes, it was kind of stupid shit, really.
Yeah.
But like someone looking in, someone explained it. People are interested nowadays, like, for instance, on Netflix, like Starting 5. Like, I love watching those in behind sporting docos, and they're like, well, that's what your life is like. There's not enough on triathlon. People want to get in there and see what you're actually doing during, and yeah, like you only realize later on, I guess, that it was another vehicle.
Dude.
Yeah.
From, like, I'm not sure how much of the trajectory, of like Black Ink in the past 5 years. Started in a caravan in Mandurah because we got stuck in COVID, like living in a caravan in this 5-acre block. I ran out of money and I was like, fuck, I got to go drive trucks again, which sounded horrible, or we're going to start Black Ink back up. So I started up literally with like laptop, and learning how to use Illustrator. That was it. Outsourcing all of our t-shirts, just designing what I could with my limited skills, putting that onto a shirt, getting it sent here. Cost $40 to make and selling it for $50. And that was like kind of the start. Then when we moved back to Bunbury, still in the caravan, living at the back of Dad's place, I was like, this podcasting, I'm sick of thinking about it. I'm just going to record a podcast. So I recorded a podcast just about every day of me talking to the camera like a psychopath for 45 minutes at least. And I have this documented journey for like the first 2/3 of the first year of me going, and today I learned how to do this and I'm trying to make this happen and here's a problem that I'm facing and all the rest. At the time, I was like, yeah, this is going to be cool if this all works. And I have this like kind of documented thing, but it was such a, like, it was just gay. Yeah. It was just like, what are we doing here, you know? And now, if I'm ever having a bad time, I put on like episode number, 20 something or episode number 4 and you're like, whoa, look where you were and look what's going on now.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine episode number 4, Jake sitting here looking at this setup in this house going like, brother, did you make it? Did it work? So now I think of that in the athlete capacity. When I see young blokes, especially in the speed skating world, and they're posting like, oh, I'm working on my double push. And I met Joey Manta the other day, who's like, number 1 and everything. And all these things, it's like, oh, dude, if you keep on this path and you actually do become a world champion, this aspect of your like training diary, your online training diary, that other people are, people who are even a year behind you are watching this and going like, oh, that's what the next year looks like. And then later on going, that's what it looked like when I was at that stage. It's invaluable. It's crazy. But obviously we have that foresight now, and an example of probably 100 athletes that have done this.
Yeah.
They've documented all the stuff, and you get to like scroll down 3 years and go, look how crappy they were here, and look at the gold medal hanging around their neck there.
Yeah. I mean, I think the classic one at the minute's that, was it Owen from the Big Bash League?
Oh, yeah.
2015, he's sitting in the crowd supporting the Hurricanes, and then on the weekend he was hitting like the winning runs or something stupid. Or
hectic.
Yeah. So, I guess people are interested in other people's lives at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's why social media exists, And like dude, you don't think I feel like a weirdo posting how much I do?
Yeah.
But people pay attention.
Yeah.
And there's something, I'm on a full journey of like, I've gone from posting girls, motorbikes, burnouts, bullshit, to now I'm literally documenting my journey through becoming like a reborn Christian, finding my faith and like trying to understand how this is contextual to my life and my business and my community. And it's like people can't get enough. Like I had a pastor, the pastor of the church that I go to, come on the other day. That is probably the most digested podcast that I've done so far as people watching it and coming back to me and saying like, love this part made me think, now I've got this question, I'm thinking of going to church. And you're like, that's crazy. That's just from being like vulnerable and authentic and honest and continuing to just go like, hey, I'm kind of embarrassed to say, but here's this thing that I'm learning and here's this journey I'm on. I feel like everybody only wants to post on social media this polished version of the character online that they want people to perceive.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really attractive is something that's actually relatable, because we're all just a work in progress. We're all just trying to find out who we are and what the fuck we're doing. You know what I mean? Like everyone's just pretending because they're an adult, they know what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
You ask a new parent, like, you in control? Absolutely not. I haven't had sleep in 3 weeks. I don't know why my kid's doing this. I'm meant to be doing this. I'm behind on this bill payment. It's like, yeah, you're in the middle of the abyss and pretending like you know what's going on. So when I share that vulnerability, I feel like there's people going like, oh, okay.
It's not just me.
It's not just me, And I think especially as an athlete, sometimes you do feel like, well, the 6 people that I train with, they get it, and it's the same in business, most people that I interact with have absolutely no idea what it's like going to sleep, not knowing how you're going to afford rent next week. They don't know that feeling, especially when it's your skills that are going to bring in the money to do it. Like, I'm not getting paid on Thursday. There's no paycheck. There's no super. There's none of that. It's just, can you figure it out? And if you can do that long enough and consistent enough, maybe one day the ceiling opens and you get and you get like a nice big reward at the end of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that authenticity and vulnerability, especially in the context of like when you're growing something like being an athlete, if you can master that, I think it's such a powerful additional skill to have on the side of being good at whatever you're good at. For example, being a triathlete.
Yeah, I guess whatever that talent is, like I've said before.
Yeah. So tell me, GloFit. You're how many years into GloFit now are you?
Well, I guess like you talk about end of career. because I had it in my head, 2020 would be sort of my last crack at Olympics. Obviously traveling extensively. Met Hilary in 2016 in April.
Yep.
Who's now my now wife. So we were up in Perth living. I kind of moved back here. Said I'll just train using Perth squads, who I knew could push me. Running with the runners up there, biking with the cyclists, and swimming with the swim squad.
Yep.
So going away from just a triathlon squad. And then Hilary was up there busy doing her Pilates training, working at multiple different studios up in Perth, seeing what kind of works, what kind of doesn't within a studio, just like opening up her eyes and I guess with the long goal of opening up her own studio.
Yep.
And then obviously lockdown hit up there. We're like, well, we want to be in the southwest. Let's quickly pack up our things, move down to Busselton. Her parents had just built a house down there, so luckily they had a granny flat out the back.
Yep.
While I still had tenants in my house in town, so wait for my tenants to sort of move out, so then we could move back in.
Yep.
And then I guess her journey in Pilates wasn't easy. There was like her mentor was kind of a little bit harsh on her at points, and she's like, I'm never going to be a good instructor, whatever else. There was those rocky moments.
Yep.
And then she actually started upstairs at Mellow Velo. She pushed all the bikes to one side.
Okay.
And used to just run classes twice a week.
Yep. Is that just
three
like
times?
mat classes or like reformer classes?
So she started just mat and box Pilates, which is a high intensity version of Pilates with a bit of Pilates in the middle. So obviously, because there's no reformers upstairs, because the reformer's obviously quite a heavy bed to move around with springs. So she just started mat and box Pilates and grew a bit of a following.
Yep.
And then she came home one day. I obviously at the time was just working at Mellow Velo. So I had kind of like slowly transitioning out of athlete life. I was like, I'll go work at the bike shop there.
Yeah.
It's something I know. I'm still
It's
around
a nice
bikes.
organic sort of move.
Selling bikes. Like I've always had an interest in bikes.
Yep.
You've got a bit of knowledge there. And then Hilary was like, I want to open a studio in town. I was like, you what? Like, how are we going to afford this sort of thing? And then she, through the Vermaruans, took on, they had a premises where actually one of Kerry had her yoga studio.
Okay.
So took on that lease there. And that's where conveyancing company I was in, Flanagan Legal next door. So just on Spencer Street, across from... Well, if you look at Bunnings from the front of the shop, or if you're looking at Bunnings, you look straight through the set of lights.
Yep.
And we were just there.
Yeah, right.
So we were there for about a year. What you always, I guess, want to do in business is grow.
Yep.
And we grew quicker than what we thought. So eventually had to find a new premises, and that's where we are now at 74 Blair Street.
The old Harley shop.
The old Harley shop. So did quite a transformation in there to get it upskilled or upspec to be a fitness studio.
Yep.
Obviously, there were the challenges early on. All of a sudden, you've got rent to pay. We had to change the studio we're in at Spencer Street, changing walls, all sorts of things to make the space, I guess, grow as you grow.
Yep.
So, and we only started with small. It was like 2 instructors. I then went and did my training. Still working at Mellow Velo, bit of part-time. I was like, Hilary, this is your gig, not mine.
Yeah.
And it just, I guess, naturally grew. Word gets out around town. We now like Pilates. We got a recovery center. We got Australian studio. Yeah. It all just snowballed out of control, really, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
In the midst of it, had 2 kids. But I guess Glow was all about Hilary. She wasn't an athlete like me or anything like that, but found that she always struggled a bit with mental health. And found that when she exercised, she got some sort of glow. And that's where Glow came from, GLO. Yeah. So it's pretty much like whether you're leaving GloFit, we want people to have like a mental glow, physical glow, whatever glow you're chasing. And that's where Glow was kind of developed, or that's how it came about. So.
I know bloody Riz and Chantel who go to GloFit every morning. I'm pretty sure, let's say 4 out of 5 days. It's like whenever Riz comes home, she is literally like just airy fairy glowing through the house. So it definitely resonates. Like it makes sense.
Yeah, and for us, like obviously my background in sport, I look at it as it's a vehicle for a better life. So those people generally that are going to GloFit, or your clients, they are looking for something to better themselves.
Yeah.
And most people you see, some people you can see 6 a.m. is like they don't want to be there, but they know it's giving them something. And then as soon as the class starts warming up, you've been there for 45 minutes, totally different people when they leave.
Yeah.
And they're like ready to conquer the day, or go sit at that office chair and get their day started.
Yeah.
And it's a real friendly space. And I guess that's what's hard was during COVID was having to potentially say no to people who went double vax or whatever. Yeah. And that was hard because we'd already created a community and it was like everyone's included. It doesn't matter who you are, what walk of life you've come from. And that's a community we've tried to create, just something really friendly.
How many members would you have at the moment between the two studios?
Up over 200 who are locked in 6-month contract. Obviously you have like some people who are casual passes or whatever.
200, a community 200 is crazy.
Yeah, and then obviously they typically bring their husband along. Next thing he's hooked, he's coming more than the wife.
Yeah.
And I mean the fitness industry is always transient. You've got people trying different things. Sometimes they get stale. They're like, that was good, but I want to try something else.
Yeah.
But it's just creating community. Like we see ex-clients are like, oh, Hartley's so big. Do you know what I mean? They were there when Hartley was 1. Now she's 3.
Yeah, true. Growing with
so
the family.
and that's what's good about Bunbury. Bunbury's so small that generally people know someone will come in and be like, oh, I know such and such that come here.
Yeah.
We're just trying to create a big community that we generally care for.
Yeah.
And want to be their vehicle to living a better life at the end of the day.
I think there's a general family like essence around these fitness-based businesses. You know, like the people who have the World Gym tag on their key ring. It's like, I'm part of this tribe sort of thing. And I know like peripherally thinking about it, there's definitely a thing of like GloFitters are GloFitters. You know what I mean? Like you've done a really good job of creating this like little sort of, I want to say clique because that sounds exclusionary. I would say like tribe of people who feel really like excited to belong to that tribe.
Yeah.
Which I think is a hard thing to cultivate, especially when you've started it from literally like it's Hilary's thing that started from no one to now 200 plus members, you know?
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for us is like you look at Pilates in Perth, it's not accessible for everyone. It's quite expensive. Where when we brought it down here, we're like, we don't want to charge those prices because we want to charge something that we think's fair.
Yeah.
That say if someone's willing to spend X amount on a carton of booze a week, well, surely they can then invest that in their health.
Yeah.
Per week, and it might be like you might have to cut out one coffee a week or whatever.
Yeah.
To make that sacrifice to be a better you. But we wanted to make it's still a vehicle that's accessible. And Pilates generally in Perth seen as like something that's quite expensive.
High-end fitness.
And then that's how the business sort of evolved. Obviously it started just as a Pilates studio with mat, box Pilates, bar and reformer Pilates. Yep. But now we've kind of morphed it into a fitness hub, and that's where GloFit comes from, where you can get your high intensity sweat session if you want.
Yep.
Lifting a few weights, getting that heart rate up. You've then got like your Pilates classes back to your mat, back to your reformer, different classes within those. So people who say have a gym membership, they're like, but I really like gym. Well, it's like, well, we do also do that too. So if you want and you're struggling, you can get rid of your gym membership and you've got it all under one banner.
Yeah, I do know, just speaking a little bit about the scope that GloFit offers. I know Riz was like diehard F45, just that sort of, which I don't know, as someone who's been in gyms like for a pretty long period of time, I always questioned how there wasn't more injuries that came from F45. It's like you wake people up and just go like, right, now do a bunch of exercises, but only do them for like a minute each and don't really warm up properly for them. I'm not throwing F45 under the bus. I'm throwing that whole style of doing exercise. It's like exercise for people who don't exercise. It's like it's just a feeling of like, oh, I did something and I sweat and I got to hold kettlebells and weight, so I did it. And I know the one thing that she really like immediately got out of GloFit and now like long term, because she's been doing it for quite a long time, is like her overall like shape and tone and everything is like so much more. I don't know what the correct word is.
Like someone said the other day, like some client, mother of 2, I think, said to Hilary, like she used to be the same thing, slightly injured from higher intensity impact gyms. And she's like, I didn't realize I could still be so toned doing a more gentle movement.
Right, shape and functionality through gentle movement rather than this sharp, I've got a fucking heavyweight, you know?
I've got to reach that peak. Obviously, sure, there's still movements or exercises you push yourself, but it's in a different comfort zone.
Yeah.
So obviously, like they always say, the magic always happens outside the comfort zone.
Yeah.
We're trying to push you in a different comfort zone, but also thinking about life as you get older.
Yeah.
So working on your balance, working on things like that as you get older, you do really need to focus a bit more on because you're no longer young anymore.
Yeah.
And if you are to fall, like you want to be as robust as possible.
Yeah.
And like I guess that's where sometimes we struggled early on with our existence with Glo is whenever we did a photo shoot or something like that, it was like all the young ones would say yes.
Yeah.
And our biggest feedback was you look like such a young Jim, where actually our walks of life are from anyone just still in school all the way up to like mid-60s.
Yeah.
It's quite a demographic. And that's what we're probably most proud about is that it's not just centered around one group of people.
Yeah, one
it's
demo.
like, you've tried to expand out to everyone. Yeah.
I haven't done Pilates as an adult at all, but I did do Pilates for like a year after fracturing my back in a pretty gnarly skating accident. And I remember that was like, I went from not being able to walk for like more than 5 minutes type thing. Like when I say not being able to walk, it was like you'd walk and be like, I'm in crazy pain, I have to sit down. It would like chill out a bit and then that on repeat. And it got really bad when I put my art boots on because I've got a heel, like artistic skates. And I'd be like, oh, there's something about elevating my heels. And I went to a physio who's like, definitely do reformer Pilates. Yeah. And it was like, when I say immediate, it was like 3-month turnaround.
Yeah.
Going from like, holy shit, I can't. And obviously that was just inflammation, strengthening everything around it so you give it an actual chance to recover. Because when you're that age, it's like you're looking at cuts healing themselves. You heal so quickly. But yeah, that was I remember that being like there's this little secret weapon here in life, which is reformer Pilates, especially for that whole like neck to hip sort of region to be able to build all the stable. Yeah.
It's it's just a different way of exercising, and I think like it gets put in a different light sometimes. Some of my mates will be like, "How's that stretching business going?" It's like, come in, have a try, because it's away from that. You're actually functionally strengthening your body. Yeah, it's not like you're lifting weights. Yeah. Some people say, "Oh, it's working finer muscles." True, but it's still working your big muscles. You're just fatiguing in a different way that you can't fatigue in a gym.
Yeah, for sure.
So. Yeah, it's been like for me, obviously transitioning from that sporting life to, Hilary owns the business, but being so involved in it and one of the faces of the business, it's where I've still got that competitive edge. Like people are like, what are you doing? Because I just see you're not racing triathlon or doing many running races. And it's like, well, I've got the business as my competitive edge because you want this to hit this goal, that goal.
Yeah.
You want to grow it this way. Yeah. So you're always looking for different things to do within the business to keep growing it. You're never satisfactory with just sitting at X amount of members, or it's like, well, let's now add a recovery center to the studio. Let's maybe try this next. You're always thinking outside the box. Yeah.
Like what's possible here? What is this business actually?
So, and I mean, like, I think since COVID, if it's taught us one thing, people realize how important it is to move your body. Yeah, whether it's going for a 20-minute walk in the morning or whatever, walking your dog, you just know mentally, like if you've actually done it and got out of that rut, you do feel better. Like I'm, for one, like Hilary would testify, this as well. Like I've got a little gym set up at home. If I can literally just go and belt some weights for 20 minutes, different person. If I can take the dog for a run for 20 minutes, different person.
100%.
And it's only like a small investment you need to make, but people would notice like a massive shift. And that's what, like I said, like Glo was from. Hilary got a mental glow, obviously with suffering from anxiety and things like that. Yeah. She just felt like a totally different person when she did exercise.
Yeah, for sure. So, I know even like hitting brick walls with problems in the business, you know, like because I live and work from home, it's like it'll be 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You're like, I just can't figure out this customer communication or this invoice or whatever it might be. It's like, go for a walk around the block, get some sun, get some air, move your body, and then you come back and you're like, oh, the answer was right there. I was too busy being clouded by bullshit, you know? Yeah. Talking about, I like that, how's your stretching business going? That is like such a fuck you, dude. I feel like from when you first started taking your athlete life seriously, let's talk about diet, how you're training, how you're recovering, all these things, till now, I mean, you would be able to testify for this. How much has changed?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, like you look at Glow, how it's growing in terms of managing staff now. Started with just 2, Hilary and another trainer. And then all of a sudden, I think there's like 10 or 12. Do you know what I mean? Instructors around that. Obviously, because you've got now Glow State, which is the recovery center with the sauna, ice bath.
Yeah.
So it's changed like massively, but also like the big moment was like I was working part-time, full-time-ish at Mellow Velo, but still instructing because obviously working later in the morning, saying 8:30 start, I can still teach 2 classes, go to work, come home from Mellow Velo, still go back to work.
Yeah.
So the biggest moment was like when I was like to Hills, I can't keep doing this, burning the candle too at both ends.
Yeah.
Something's got to give. And she's like, why don't we just go all into GloFit? And I was like, but there goes that guaranteed salary a week.
Yeah, lean in, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, and it's like now the business is the only way of making income.
Yeah.
Like that was a big risk, but then it paid dividends because I guess people like seeing me more in the studio.
Yeah.
So it's like, and Hilary had to step back when we've had both kids now.
Yeah.
So at least one of us was still at the forefront and it wasn't like you're just running a franchise.
For
managers
sure.
on or whatever. It's like we're really a family invested business.
I always go to the analogy of, I always looked at, if you get your average person, they work a Monday to Friday and half day Saturday, right? And you go, how much are you making? 90 grand a year. Cool. All right. If I said you've got every minute of every day, you don't have to work anymore, and your only job was to figure out how to make $90,000 this year, could you do it? And like, there's usually 2 answers. Absolutely. Or I guess if I really had to.
Yeah.
Right. So then you go, well, why wouldn't you do it? Oh, because there's no guarantee that's going to happen. But you've got every minute of every day to do that now.
Yeah.
If your whole thing is like, right, tomorrow I'm waking up, fucking walk, breakfast, coffee, bang, going to sit down at my table and just be on my phone. First thing I do, Google, how do I make $90,000 from home? Or how do I make $90,000 from my phone? Day 2, you've downloaded an app. You're doing this. Maybe you're delivering papers now. Maybe you're doing something. And yes, it's still kind of work, but you're always going to work, right? It's figuring out how to work for yourself in a way to generate that money. So now you don't have, Mike, your boss, telling you like, you've got to do this by this time, rah, rah. And now you're Jake, the boss, saying, Jake, you've got to deliver these papers, do this, do that, rah, rah, rah. And I think what you're talking about there, that jump from going like the guarantee from I get paid on Thursday night to now there is no guarantee, but you don't have to, the block of 8:30 to 3:30 that you were at Mellow Velo, that's now yours.
Yeah.
So now you get to go home and go like, what about a recovery studio? What if we put a wall over here and we make another thing? What if we put on staff members over here to delegate this menial stuff that's going to happen day in, day out that's robbing our bandwidth so that we're left with more bandwidth just to figure out how to grow this thing and how to do better. Yeah. All right, Hilary, go be a mum. Yeah. All right, Hilary, go be a mum again. And because you've given yourself all this time, you're then gifted that energy into the business rather than gifting it to this security of bringing in whatever the paycheck is every Thursday.
Yeah. And it always like, as an athlete, it's always like, it sounds so cliche, but the magic happens outside that comfort zone.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes you got to look where that comfort zone is, whether it's like, all right, I'm going to go all in. But I mean, like business, it has its ups, it has its downs. And I mean, when it hits the fan, you have to step in and do it. Like you might have a weekend plan, someone calls in sick, you weren't rostered on, but you've just got to do it. So I mean, everything's got its perks. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a statistic out where only 10% of the world's potentially job satisfied, where they feel like they roll into work and they don't feel like it's a chore.
Yeah.
I feel lucky where I feel like I'm in that 10%.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you look at your life, how much of it is working, I think if you can find something you're good at while still making a bit of a living, I think you've done it right. So.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'll tell you what, that's a cool place to call it. Is there anything that you'd like to, do you have any questions for me?
Not really. I like in the new hair.
There's podcast number 2 with the new hair. I feel like a new man, and everyone's giving me compliments on it. So it must have meant that the other style did not suit me.
Yeah. No, I think you just sometimes change is good, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, growing up, I had dreadlocks and then had cut it off once, grew them back, cut it off again, grew them back. And then
really?
Yeah.
Oh, hectic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm never growing long hair again. This is it now.
Yeah. And then as you get older, you just hope the hair hangs around.
Yeah. Well, that was always the thing. I'll cut it off when I start losing it.
Yeah.
And I just got to a point tying my hair out one morning. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I hate this, Because like every time you want to go for a ride and it's in a bun, it's like, oh, I don't got to put it down, brush it, plait it, and then I can go for a ride. What do I do when I get home? I immediately put it back up because I don't like it down. And it's like going to sleep because I sleep a lot in the afternoons and work during the night. And it's like, if I got it down for the day, it's like before I go to sleep, I got to put it up. It's like, this is a full-time job. I just got to, just cut it off. And as soon as I made that decision, it couldn't happen quick enough. And literally as he cut off the plait, it was like my head just got lighter. I'm like, oh, I should have done this a year ago.
There you go. 2025 is going to be a good year, baby.
Oh, we're on. We're on. Now, if people want to find you, they want to find GloFit, I'm going to put all of your links in the description below. So that'd just be Instagram, your Facebook, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, if you've been thinking about giving it a go, just give it a go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a welcoming community. Hit us up on socials or just walk into the studio and give it a crack.
Do the thing.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Everyone, be good to your mum because we are out.